Being a police officer is considered a risky profession because you often put your life in danger. However, being a police officer in a small town can be one of the calmest jobs in the world. After all, the town I worked in was very small, surrounded by forests and cornfields. Most of the crimes involved minors, fights in the only 5 bars in town, drunk drivers who couldn't even get home, or domestic violence. All of these crimes were resolved quickly. But even in a peaceful town, strange things can happen, and to this day, 3 cases haunt me and keep me awake at night. Story 1. The Shadow in the Basement. When I started in the police force, I had a lot of energy but little experience. This story happened on a rainy night when the town seemed to stop because of the storm. It was the kind of night when you expect problems to come from simple things, like a fallen tree or a flood, but I never thought something so macabre would happen in that house. My partner and I received a call about strange sounds coming from an old house, one of those built in the early 20th century, with a dark basement and a vast, isolated lot. When we arrived, we found a terrified family. They said they heard footsteps and banging on the walls, but no one could see anything. At first, I thought it was a joke, but the fear in their eyes was real. We decided to investigate and went to the basement, which was locked. When we managed to open the door, the smell of mold and decay was unbearable. The flashlight illuminated little but enough to see that the place had been neglected for years. I went down the stairs first and immediately sensed something strange. The silence was oppressive, the kind of silence that precedes the unknown. I walked toward the farthest corner and then I saw it, a shadow moving erratically across the wall. It wasn't a reflection, nor something I could explain rationally. It was a solid form, but inconsistent, as if it were alive, but at the same time, not. The air around me became thicker, and I struggled to breathe. I tried to shout for my partner, but my voice seemed muffled. The shadow moved faster, starting to approach me. Then I heard the growl, a low, guttural sound that made my bones tremble. I wanted to run, but something kept me in place. Fear wouldn't let me move. I looked at the wall again, and the shadow now formed into a humanoid figure, with a deformed head and long, thin arms stretching out as if trying to reach me. Then, with a scream of pure distress, it vanished. Not like something dissipating into the air, but as if it had been sucked into the wall itself. I ran upstairs, and what I found was even stranger. The place was empty, as if no one had ever been there. And the most disturbing thing, no one remembered them. No record of their arrival, nothing. Just the feeling that something was in the basement, and that it's still there, waiting for another fool to dare investigate. To this day, my partner and I prefer not to talk about the case. After all, we'd be labeled as crazy. Story 2. The Crying Woman. I always thought that after years of service, I had seen everything. But this story still haunts me today, and I'm a veteran, so believe me, I know what real fear is. This happened about 10 years ago, and to this day, I still question whether it was a nightmare or if it really happened. It was a cold November night, a moonless night with the sky covered by heavy clouds. I was patrolling an isolated area of the town, a stretch of road that winds through forests and hills. The radio broadcasted a call for a disturbance at a remote location where the residents were hearing screams and cries for help. It was an old house, one of those built on a secluded lot that people avoid passing by after dark. I arrived at the house in question, and as I approached, the door was slightly ajar. The house lights were off and the atmosphere was strangely silent, as if the air was tense. I entered, my hand on my weapon, prepared for anything. The feeling that something was wrong tightened my chest. When I entered the living room, I saw a woman who seemed normal, but the look on her face was that of someone who had lost their sanity. She was standing, motionless in a corner of the room, her eyes fixed on some distant point, without saying a word. As I approached her, I asked what was going on, but she just pointed to the back of the house where a dark corridor led to the basement. "He's down there," she whispered. "He'll never leave me alone." I decided to go deeper into the house, and as I walked down the corridor, the atmosphere changed. The air grew denser, as if I was crossing an invisible barrier. The cold increased with every step, and when I reached the basement door, I heard it, the crying. It started softly, like a child's cry, but quickly turned into something much deeper and more desperate. My police instincts alerted me. Something was there, but it wasn't human. I opened the basement door carefully. As I descended the stairs, the darkness seemed to swallow everything. Then, in the corner, I saw her. A figure. A woman, crouching with her hair covering her face, crying uncontrollably. But there was something wrong with her. Something that wasn't right. The sound of her crying didn't seem human. It was as if many voices were blending into one. A collective cry. Before I could act, I felt a pressure on my chest, as if someone was suffocating me. The temperature dropped drastically, and when I looked at the woman, she lifted her head, revealing a distorted, pale face with empty, dark eyes. It was then that she spoke, but not with her mouth. It was a voice inside my head. "Help me. They're watching me. He's here." Suddenly, the crying stopped and she disappeared. There was no trace of her. I ran back down the corridor, and when I returned to the living room, the woman was gone. What was left was the deadly silence of the house. But the strangest thing? I found no evidence that anyone lived there. No documents, no traces of life. The house had been abandoned for years, but that woman, with that face, it seemed like she was still trapped there, like a shadow. Story 3. The Stranger Who Disappeared. It was a quiet night, the kind of night you expect when on patrol. No significant activity, just the sound of the radio and the car engine. I was on a remote road on the outskirts of town. This road, which passes through fields and a small forest, always gave me the feeling that something bad could happen there at any moment, although nothing alarming had ever occurred. I sped up the car, and as I got closer, I slowed down, turning on the headlights to get a better look. When the headlights hit him, he still didn't move. His face was pale, almost cadaverous, and his clothes were strange, as if they were from another time, with fabric dirty and torn. He didn't seem like a regular resident, but something was very wrong. I gave him an order to move, but he didn't react. I got out of the car, my hand already near my weapon, feeling the weight of the situation. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I shouted. He didn't answer, but his eyes were completely empty. It was as if he had no soul, a deep emptiness, something not human. I approached him cautiously, my flashlight illuminating his face. When I got close enough to almost touch him, he looked at me and, with a slow, calculated movement, whispered, "Help me." I froze. I don't know why, but something inside me couldn't move. I couldn't look into his eyes, so I looked down at his hands and saw something that made me lose control. He was covered in dirt. It wasn't like he had fallen or was just dirty. He looked as if he had been buried, as if he had been in a grave for a long time. Before I could react, he took a step back and disappeared. No noise, no trace. A cold breeze passed by me, and for a moment I thought I had made a mistake, that it was just a trick of my tired mind. But the feeling that something wasn't right wouldn't leave me in peace. I searched the area for hours. I called the other officers, but there was no sign of him. No footprints, no traces. The only thing that remained was the feeling that I had witnessed something I shouldn't have seen. Something that wasn't from this world. A few weeks later, while filing a patrol report, someone mentioned an old case of a man who had disappeared on the same road. He had been declared dead, and his body was never found. At that moment, the puzzle piece fell into place. The man I saw wasn't alive anymore. Story 4. The Man in the Mirror. I've never liked cases involving mirrors. There's something about them that always unsettled me. It's as if they're watching you, in a way that can't be explained. And when this case landed on my desk, I knew I was about to face something that couldn't be understood. It was just a regular night when I got the call. An emergency at an old apartment in downtown. A resident was reporting something strange in the mirror. At first, I thought it was a joke, but the tone in the woman's voice and her repeated mention of a man in the mirror made me hesitate. I decided to go alone since my partner was tied up with another case. When I got to the location, I found a woman who was visibly shaken, trembling, her eyes red from crying. She told me that since she moved into this apartment, strange things had been happening. "I see him. He's in the mirror, but it's not me I'm seeing," she said, almost in a daze. I entered the apartment and immediately noticed something felt off. The place wasn't dark from lack of light, but the atmosphere itself felt heavy. There was a suffocating quality to the air. The woman was standing in front of a large mirror in the living room. I approached, and that's when I saw what she meant. The mirror reflected the woman, but there was something else. A figure, a man, standing right behind her, his face hidden in shadows. I squinted and looked closer, but the figure seemed unreal. It wasn't moving as it should. It was simply standing there, immersed in shadows, as if trying to hide itself. I stepped back from the mirror, my mind trying to rationalize the situation. "He's always there. Every time I look, he's closer," she whispered, staring into the mirror as if terrified to turn away. Then something bizarre happened. The mirror began to vibrate. Not physically, but somehow. The glass seemed to tremble slightly, like something was trying to come out. The woman screamed, and I took a step back, but before I could react, I heard a muffled sound, like a whisper. But it didn't come from her. It came from the mirror itself. "Look at me." The voice was clear, as if it were inside my head. I rushed toward the woman, trying to pull her away from the mirror, but she wouldn't move. She stood there, frozen, her eyes glazed over, as if she were being pulled into the reflection. Then, the figure in the mirror started to smile. It wasn't a human smile. I've never seen anything more terrifying. It began to move now, getting closer, and I heard a sound. A heavy breath. I yanked the woman away and tried to pull her from the trance, but she wouldn't budge. The figure in the mirror became more powerful, more vivid, until in a swift movement it shot out of the glass toward us. The woman screamed again, fainting in my arms, and all that remained was a snap, like the glass breaking, but the mirror was intact. I quickly carried her out of the apartment and called for psychiatric assistance, but when I returned to the apartment later, I found no sign of the man in the mirror. The mirror was clean. The apartment empty. But I never stepped into a place with mirrors like that again. Something about that glass wasn't just reflecting reality, it was consuming it. Story 5. The Scream in the Forest. When you've worked as a cop for as long as I have, you lose faith in what's normal. But there are cases that challenge even the most skeptical. This story happened on a particularly dark night, when the silence of the forest was broken by something I could never explain. It was a Saturday, and I was patrolling a rural area near a small village. There was a dense forest nearby, known for being the site of strange events in the past. Some of the older residents talked about legends involving unexplained disappearances and distant screams echoing through the trees at night. I had always dismissed these as local ghost stories, until the call came in. Strange screams coming from the forest. It wasn't uncommon for someone to get lost after drinking too much, but there was something about the tone of the call that made me take it seriously. I decided to investigate on my own. When I got to the edge of the forest, a sense of unease hit me immediately. It wasn't just the darkness, it was the feeling that something wasn't right. The air was thick, as if the entire place were holding its breath. I entered the narrow trail and walked deeper into the woods, the sound of my own footsteps echoing through the dense underbrush. That's when I heard it. The scream. It wasn't like any scream I'd ever heard before. It was desperate, but it had something unnatural about it. I can't quite explain it, but it was as if the scream was a mix of pain and anger. The sound seemed to come from deep within the trees, as if the forest itself were screaming. I drew my weapon, ready for anything. I moved further in, and then I saw her. A woman, standing in the middle of the trail, her long, wet hair covering her face. She was facing away from me, but I could feel that she knew I was there. "You shouldn't be here," she said without turning around. My heart raced. I didn't respond, but I kept watching. She didn't move, as if she was waiting for something. Suddenly, she turned, and I saw her face. It wasn't human. Her features were distorted, as if her skin had been stretched beyond what was possible. Her eyes were completely white, no pupils, and her mouth was open. Not to scream, but to devour the darkness around her. I froze, staring, and before I could react, she vanished. It wasn't a quick movement, but more like she dissolved into the ground, sinking into the earth. I ran out of the forest, my heart pounding in my chest. When I looked back, the only thing I saw were the trees. But the scream. The scream stayed with me for days, echoing in my mind, making me question what I had really seen. Since that night, no one else has heard the scream, but for me, it's still there. Every time I look at the forest, waiting, as if it's waiting for another fool to cross its path. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video, especially you who stayed until the end, so I ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content. Thank you very much for watching this far. Until the next video.